3, 2.
Hello, everyone. I'm Carliss Chatman, and I'm your host of Getting Common. In my day job, I'm an associate professor at Washington and Lee, where I teach business law, corporate ethics, corporate governance, and M&A practicum, and contracts. This episode, we are going to be talking about Elon Musk and his tweeting. The name of the episode is Why Should Elon Musk Stop Tweeting? And with my guests, we're going to be discussing what securities regulations are about, why it matters when a super famous person sends out tweets if he's, the owner and director of a company. And I've got some great guests for you who are experts in the field who can break it all down. So I will let them introduce themselves. First, starting with Kathy.
Hi, so thank you so much for having me. This is so fun, and I like being able to hang out with two of my favorite people. So I'm Kathy Wong. I'm a law professor at the University of Virginia, where I teach and write about corporate law. Like Carliss, I also have a case book, which is like a law textbook coming out on the law of corporations. Mine is co-authored with Paolo Saguato. And let me just say that Elon Musk provides a lot of really good fodder for my class and for the book. So I'm really grateful to him. Before becoming a law professor, I was a mergers and acquisitions attorney at Skadden Arps in New York, where I also met Ben, actually.
Hello. I'll pick it up. I'm a law professor at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, William S. Boyd School of Law. I teach business association, securities regulation, securities litigation courses. I will sometimes run a law clinic focused on retail investor protection and do other stuff in the financial services space. I do not yet have a case book. We'll see whether or not I ever end up with one. So, but congratulations to both of you for writing the books that the next generation will read.
Well, and Ben, you shouldn't speak too soon, because I could totally bring you in on a securities book. So we may need to talk offline about that, because, Karen and I have been supposed to be writing a securities case book for years that we just can't get our hands on. So maybe it'll be like Chatman, Woody, and Edwards as the case book. That could work.
That could work.
Yeah. All right. So the first thing I want to talk about is, why does it matter? Like, why do the tweets of a corporate executive matter? And so, Ben, you're always my go-to person on securities in the SEC, because even though I teach Sec Reg, I find that you are always more up to speed on it, mainly because of your clinic and other things. Like, you're way more in the weeds. So, like, why does it matter to the SEC when a random guy like Elon Musk tweets as a public stunt?
Oh, of course. So Elon Musk is, he's a random guy, but he's also the CEO of a publicly traded company. So there are millions of Tesla shares on the market. And at every moment that the shares are actively trading, investors are trying to decide whether they should buy the shares, sell the shares, if they want to hold on to them. And the kind of information that the CEO puts out into the world has a real impact on how investors make those decisions. So the SEC has always been very focused on how companies speak to the public about what's going on with the company. So it's not just Twitter where this is a concern. It's all of social media. There's a relatively famous, and I say famous in the narrow world of securities law professors, example from Facebook. A few years ago, Netflix put out a Facebook post saying that they had just crossed over, 1 billion hours of viewing. And the SEC sent them a notice saying that they were going to investigate that. Why are they telling this to the public through Facebook instead of through the disclosure system that's set up for public companies? So that's really it's been a long time concern for the SEC about how information is shared. And just to sort of close the loop on Netflix, that enforcement proceeding didn't really go anywhere because there's nothing. And we'll talk a lot more about this later, I'm sure, really material about crossing from 1 billion hours minus one to 1 billion hours. It wasn't that big of a deal. But generally speaking, the SEC is keeping an eye on how companies are speaking to the public about what's going on.
All right, now, Kathy, when the SEC cares about something, when they care about the information that Ben is talking about, what do they do about it? What can they do about it?
Yeah. So, I mean, there are so many things and so many of them are scary, right? So as a baseline, I would say the SEC cares a lot about various types of information getting out to investors, right? So that's why they have this disclosure system, which we'll talk a little bit more about later with the 8K. So theoretically, you're just supposed to, if you're following the rules, you're filing an annual disclosure, you're filing quarterly disclosures, you're filing current disclosures anytime something kind of big happens, outside of the quarter or annual setting. And that's supposed to get information out to your investors. And if you're doing it right, things are good. But if you are not doing things the way you're supposed to, lots of scary, scary things can happen. And to that end, I think we can look to, two, I guess I would call them documentary television shows, Succession and Arrested Development. So in Succession, if you're a Succession fan, you'll know that we're on season 3, and in season 3, a big thing that's happening right now is that the company is being investigated by the Department of Justice. And the government, through bodies like the SEC or DOJ, can investigate when things look fishy or things are not happening the way they want them to. And if you follow the show, you'll also see that there's kind of a really realistic aspect of that, is that even just an investigation is going to consume a lot of like the C-suite's time, energy, and resources just to deal with it, right? So you're producing documents, you're flying people across the country to like talk to the regulators. They start to get ability to look at your books and records. It's just a disruptive thing that distracts your leadership from doing things like making money, for instance, which is presumably what you want them to do. And then some of the worst things that can happen is that the SEC can freeze the company's assets or fine the company or charge the alleged wrongdoers with fraud. And when I say charge the alleged wrongdoers with fraud, we're talking about criminal charges. So people could go to jail. So here I'm calling on your knowledge from a few years ago. If you watched Arrested Development, this literally happens in the first episode of the series. So the family that runs the company, they're on a yacht, they're having a party, they're living that yacht life. And the SEC's boats come and they arrest the dad, they disrupt the party, and they freeze the family's assets. And one of my favorite lines from the show actually happens when the family says, wait, the SEC has boats now. And that's where I would say that fact departs from fiction. To my knowledge, I don't think the SEC has boats, but they can disrupt your fancy yacht party, arrest the patriarch, freeze the family's assets, leaving you with only the banana stand. And, bad things can happen.
There's cash in the banana stand, though. There's cash in the banana stand. There
is cash in the banana stand.
Yeah, so I think the SEC gets its boats from the Department of Justice, which has lots of boats. It doesn't usually have, as far as I can tell, a criminal jurisdiction. It's normally a civil jurisdiction, but when they send something over to the Department of Justice, they're the ones who bring the fraud prosecution. So they work very closely together, and so you'll see SEC lawyers working with DOJ lawyers. But yeah, I don't think the SEC has any boats.
Where are my boats? It seems like everyone has boats.
The DEA also has boats, right? We should make a list. That's an episode, which government agencies have boats.
I would have thought they would have just borrowed the Coast Guard's boats.
That too.
You would think.
Yeah, but that's that big government redundancy, right? Why do so many agencies need boats?
Everyone has boats. I'm very upset about this.
We could just organize the federal government again to create a Department of Federal Boats.
Yes.
And then all agencies that need to use a boat could just access the boat through a single boat coordinating agency.
Like a fleet, when you were a kid, you probably had to share a boat, share a car with your sister. You just talk to your parents and you're like, I'm driving the Corolla today.
This could be my next law review article.
Or it could be a campaign platform.
Where to put the government's boats.
Yes. We're going to streamline government by eliminating some boats. So
streamline, I see what you did there.
Yes. I'm trying. If that's the only way I can run for office, right? I got to talk about budgets because I don't know that I survive a background check. But on to Elon Musk and the tweeting. So Elon tweeted, and I actually closed my Outlook, or I closed my browser, but he sent this tweet a couple of years ago. Was it on April 20th?
Taking the company private?
Yes, the taking the company private tweet. So Elon Musk sends this tweet while he is indulging in some substances with his girlfriend, possibly with, was someone locked in the house at the time? I can't remember. But he says, thinking of taking Tesla private for 420. And then the 420 is apparently a joke because that's below the value of Tesla, but he was making a marijuana joke. And then the follow-up tweet was, shareholders would have the option of taking cash or stock and staying in. Thread goes crazy. People are commenting back and forth. He claims he's already got investors. The GC's office of Tesla has no idea what he's saying. So when they reach out to the GC's office and other people at Tesla, they're like, we don't know what you're talking about. And it turns out he's just having some fun, having a joke, right? So the SEC slapped his hand and punished him. How can he still be tweeting, right? Like if this is market manipulation, which we'll define later, and he's just making a joke about the stock price, and we've talked about how that's a bad thing. How is it possible that he's still able to keep tweeting and still keep being in charge of Tesla? Like, why didn't anything happen to him? Do you want to take that?
I guess,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, I'll say the easy stuff and then leave Ben, the securities expert, to follow up with the challenging stuff. So I would say he's gotten in trouble before, right? So a few years ago, he got in trouble. Well, actually, it was this exact incident where he gets in trouble, and the SEC investigates him, and they settled. And it was like Musk and Tesla had to pay millions of dollars in penalties. Musk had to give up being chairman of the company for a certain period of time. And then this is the most interesting part: the company agreed to get someone to supervise his tweets. That person, can you imagine what does that person's LinkedIn look like? I'm the supervisor of Elon Musk's tweets. So, I think he's gotten in trouble with it before. He's gotten penalized for it. The company's gotten penalized. My personal view is kind of when you're dealing with someone whose net worth is now, as of yesterday, over $300 billion, it's really hard to motivate him through fines, right? You fine him $20 million, but he has $3 billion. That's that's just one of his boats that he's selling, maybe half of a boat, right? When I was in college, I used to calculate, we had this joke where we would calculate the cost of things by chicken soft tacos from Del Taco, right? It would be this, a Chipotle burrito is worth 4 chicken soft tacos. For him, it's $20 million is worth half a boat. So what does he care?
Yeah. So, this tweet from a few years ago, where he says, we're going to go private at $420 a share, funding secured. So that's well below Tesla's stock price today. At the time, Tesla was trading, I think, in the 300s, and there was a lot of what we call short interest in the stock. So there were, a lot of people who thought that Elon Musk had a real big mouth, but that he wouldn't be able to deliver on schedule like he was promising people that he was going to be able to do. And so their prediction was that Tesla as a company probably would not do all that well, and that the stock price would not reach anything like what it's reached today. And so they were betting against the company. And the way that works is you can imagine it if Carliss has a share of stock and I want to bet against the company, but I don't own any stock, what I'll do is I'll borrow a share of stock from her. So if I reach over, take the share of stock, which is this pen cap, I borrow it from her, and then I'll sell it, and maybe I'll sell it to Kathy or somebody else. Now, if the stock's at 300, when I sell the share that I borrowed, I have $300, and that's great. I have $300. If the stock goes down, I can buy it back. Then I have the share, and then I can return the borrowed share to Kathy or to Carliss. I sold it to Kathy, borrowed it from Carliss. Now, if the stock price has gone to 250, I've done this, bet against the company. When I give the share back, I've made $50 by the company's stock going down, and that's wonderful for me. Now, what I can't do is say I borrow the share when it's at $300 a share next. I think it's going to go to 200, 250. And then Elon Musk comes out and says that funding has been secured. The company is going to be going private at $420 a share. Now, what this says to ordinary people is, if I buy a share of Tesla at 300, when the company goes private, they're going to give me $400 or $420 for my share. So this happens in M&A deals all the time. Once the deal is announced, the stock price shoots up to the deal price because it's usually a pretty good bet that unless the deal falls through, that's the amount of money you're going to get. Now, so I borrowed this share. Imagine I borrowed this share. I've shorted the company. What's really dangerous about this is I can lose an infinite amount of money depending on how high the stock price goes. So if I borrowed $300 a share, and I've got $300, now the stock is at 420. If I'm going to give Carliss her share back, I have to come up with another like $120 per share I've done this transaction with in order to close the trade. And so I'm going to lose $120 for every share I've shorted if I close the trade. Now, why would I close the trade? Because if the company goes private and I've got to settle this out, I'm still losing all the money. But the other big reason why I'm going to close the trade is because I borrowed money from Kathy in order to do this trade. She's running my account and says, Ben, if you can't pay me all the money you owe me, I'm going to shut your account down and I'm going to take your house or your car or what else I can do. I'm going to take you to FINRA arbitration and sue you for all the money you have to make up for the amount of money you're losing on this Tesla short. So that dynamic is what was going on with that tweet. So there are an enormous number of people who lost huge chunks of money, margin calls. They were forced to sell other holdings in order to deal with it. So it's enormously disruptive, and it drove the stock price up for a period of time, enough time to really hurt a lot of the people who were shorting the company and force them to take those bets away. So the SEC obviously is very, very concerned about this, and he has something of a defense in that it's $420 a share. That's clearly a marijuana reference. But the hard thing is, how do you punish Elon Musk for that? The SEC normally has just sort of civil jurisdiction, and so the ultimate settlement that came out from the enforcement proceeding was $40 million. I think it was $20 million from Tesla, $20 million from Elon Musk, and it was part of the deal with the settlement was that they would supervise his tweets, and in the future, hopefully something like this wouldn't happen. Now, is what he did really bad? Yes. Is Tesla still likely facing a lot of liability arising out of that? I think so. I think there's a bunch of private securities litigation ongoing, from that debacle. All the people who lost money because of that 420 statement, they're going to sue. They're going to be represented in a class action, and Tesla's going to have to defend that. It's a giant, giant mess for the company. I didn't look up where that litigation is right now, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's still dragging on. So huge toxic overhang for the company.
So here's what's interesting about, him claiming, well, it brings up first year contracts, right? Like if it's a joke, you need to objectively have everyone know it's a joke. And if it's only a subjective joke in your head, then it's not a joke, right? So basic first year contracts there. But, for him to claim it's a joke when we all know Elon Musk hates that people short Tesla, because Tesla's never actually made a profit, right? Like Tesla's profits are all fake, which, that's a short way of saying it. But, Tesla's never made a true on the books profit. So people short it all the time, and he hates short sellers. So, it's kind of hard to believe you when you say it's a joke when we know you hate these people and it drives you crazy when people short your stock. There's that part. The part about his tweets being monitored, he tweeted this year a poll asking whether he should sell Tesla stock. The poll said so that he could pay taxes, because Elizabeth Warren and everyone else is coming after billionaires for not paying taxes. The poll said that he should. In the meanwhile, the Tesla stock is dropping because everyone thinks Elon Musk is going to sell his shares. Then when it comes out that he actually does sell shares, several of the articles I have seen, I think he said he was going to sell 10 billion, 20 billion. I can't remember how many billions of his shares. It turned out he already had a sale of 1.3 on the books before he ever put out the tweet asking for a poll. So he was already planning to liquidate some shares, but he does this publicity stunt, and the two things I'm wondering is, where's this person with the horrible LinkedIn profile, as Kathy said, who's supposed to be reading Elon Musk's tweets and monitoring his tweets? Like, this person did not stop this poll. And how is he still tweeting things that move Tesla's stock price that are half truths if this SEC enforcement has any teeth? How? What are your thoughts, Kathy? Or Ben?
I don't know where this person is, probably on their boat as everyone else is. I genuinely don't know, right? When I remember when the settlement came out, I thought literally they would hand the password for Elon Musk's Twitter to somebody else. Ben, for instance, and Elon would say, I want to tweet a poll, and Ben would be like, well, let's not run it past legal first. So what's the poll about? If it's about which color socks you want to wear, that's okay. But if it's about whether to sell stock, we gotta talk about that. But it does not appear to me the supervision is not evident to me. But maybe it's stopping us from seeing some of the other things. I would say, with regard to your joke idea, when I read the poll, and I'm going to go ahead and readily admit that I participated in the poll and I voted yes, and that's because I'm a sociopath who just likes to stir the pot and watch it go boom, I just wanted to see what would happen, and so I voted on it, and I don't know, I don't know where the person is. I thought it was a joke. I was surprised that it was not a joke, and he did it. And I think I'm a reasonably sophisticated person, in terms of being able to tell whether things are jokes or not.
I also voted on the poll. I voted yes. I also drive a Tesla.
Did you think it was a joke?
I totally thought it was a joke. And I think I'm a reasonable person under the law.
A reasonable investor, right?
Yes.
Ben, did you think it was a joke? Did you vote?
Did you vote, Ben?
I voted. I think I voted yes, because you should pay some taxes. And we have things we need to do, like fix our bridges
and buy boats.
Yeah.
Or plow the streets of Virginia.
Yeah.
I don't think Main Street has been plowed yet.
Yeah. Well, and Kathy and I both live in Charlottesville, and we're recording this early, so people have been stuck on I-95 for 22 hours, and my power keeps going out in my house in Charlottesville after a single snowstorm. So I would like Elon Musk to pay some taxes so I could have some infrastructure.
Yeah. Well, here in sunny Las Vegas, we're just keeping an eye on this. What's happening on the other side of the country. So I wanted to circle back to Elon Musk's Twitter nanny. The idea that there's someone who's going to be watching what he's tweeting. There's actually an ongoing case about that right now in Delaware. One of Tesla's stockholders has filed a lawsuit under state corporate law to say, we believe that I don't believe that Tesla is complying with the settlement that it has with the SEC, and that's causing damage to shareholders. And so how far that case gets, we'll have to watch to see, but we may get more information about what kind of monitoring process, if any, is actually in place. My view is that a lot of his tweets that other people probably wouldn't have allowed, if I were the person who was tasked with monitoring, I probably would have said, fine, go ahead. One of these, let me give you one of these that I think is kind of a boundary case, and get your opinion on it. He tweeted at some point when the stock was very high, he tweeted that he thought the stock price was too high, that Tesla's price was too high. And so I know some Tesla stockholders who follow the company, and are very interested in this. So we were talking about it over the holiday break, and they were upset because they bought Tesla and they want the stock to keep going up. And so if he says the stock price is too high, that's a problem for them because that means, maybe other people aren't going to buy the stock and they're not going to make as much money. And they don't think he should be able to do that as the CEO. And they were upset about it because that could possibly cost them some money. And so I was thinking about it, and I asked him. I said, "So, what do you think? What if a CEO of a public company says, the market doesn't value our stock as much as it should? So it'd be an expression of opinion that the stock price is too low, and that the market should put more value on the company." Now, I think, is everybody okay with that? Does that seem fine?
So here's the difference to me. I expect everyone to say their stock is too low.
Yeah.
I don't expect anyone to say their stock is too high. So if we use a reasonable investor standard, if a CEO is saying our stock is overvalued, I take that to be an honest statement and not puffery. But if I say my stock is too low, well, everyone says their stock is too low. Everyone says, at what I do and what I say is more valuable than what you're paying me, right? So it's the, if we go reasonable person, right? I think everyone who says too low is lying. But I think everyone who says too high is telling the truth, because why would you tell me your stock is overpriced?
Maybe he's just a really honest guy, Carliss. A man of the people.
I don't, do those exist? Like, I don't know. I've taught a lot of corporate law. Don't see many honest guys. Don't see many.
They usually don't show up in the cases. They're much less fun.
But they're everywhere, I'm sure.
Are they?
So it's hard for me to say. I'm gonna take the opposite side. It's an opinion statement, and so if he believes it, and he's telling the truth, and you assume he's telling the truth, you think it's material, but it doesn't say anything about the company. It doesn't say that production is going to be delayed. It doesn't say that we're going to release the Cybertruck on X date. So if I were supervising him, I might let that one go. I wouldn't like it. I wouldn't recommend it. But I don't know that it's fraud. I don't know that that expression of opinion. And I don't know that the SEC would necessarily want to act on that particular statement. If you're gonna pick a fight, is it not a good look? Yes. Is it strange behavior? Absolutely. I'm not sure that I would go after it though.
Well, and I think, materiality has its contexts. Knowing that Elon Musk fights short sellers all the time, of course he's going to say a stock is too high. Or, he's going to say things about his stock price on a regular basis. And the hard thing is, when he speaks, the market moves. And so even like if you have a Twitter nanny, it's kind of like if you have a compliance program, it actually needs to be a compliance program. If you've got a Twitter nanny, what is the Twitter nanny doing? Like, it's like the Twitter nanny is just sitting him in front of the computer and letting him tweet.
So one question I have is
if he crawls too close to like a hot stove, that's where you want the nanny to get in and grab and pull him away. Just making a mess generally. A corporate monitor, I should say, not Twitter nanny.
So do we think that when I think about we're talking about we all know that he hates short sellers. We all know that 420 is a joke about his substance usage or whatever. This is all obvious. We know that he does. Do we think a regular reasonable investor does? I know, Ben, I know you've written a bunch about retail investors, and sure, we don't have that many retail, cute grannies putting her, social security check into Tesla or whatever. But I'm just thinking about what a reasonable investor looks like. And does the reasonable investor really know all of this about Elon Musk? When we teach corporations, all of our students are smart and probably would count as a reasonable investor. And I don't think they all know that.
Yeah. So this is a great point to probably talk about what it means for information to be material.
Yes.
And there's a 3-part test that courts use. And it's asking whether or not a reasonable investor would consider the information to significantly alter the total mix of information. And so if you say, we have 2 million employees, and the truth comes out, and you have 2,000,001 employees, the reasonable investor, most people I would think are going to look at that and say that, that it's 2,000,001 instead of 2 million. That's not that big a deal. It doesn't really change the picture about the company in any real significant way. So it's probably not material. And that's usually the test. So when it comes to this reasonable investor standard, or reasonable person standard inside the materiality definition is really a mess, because what does it mean? What does a reasonable investor care about? What are they focused on? And there's a lot of subjectivity, I think, that goes into that, and a lot of times, that standard has been a way for courts to just sort of substitute their own opinions for what people would care about. I can tell you, I had one investor call me one time, and he'd invested in a company, and the deal he'd received from them was that if he invested another $500, they would give him a Yetirambler. And if you're not familiar with the Yetirambler, let me show it to you.
It's very nice,
beautiful,
nice cup. Yeah,
lovely
cup. It is vacuum sealed. So if you get water at night and you put some ice in it in the morning, no lid, the ice will still be in there. It's a fantastic, well-insulated cup. Anyway, they didn't send him the Rambler after he invested another $500, and the man was hot. He wanted to sue, and I told him I understood that I am the proud owner of a Yetirambler, and I love that thing, and it's great. It's what he cared about more than anything else was not the financial returns on the investment, but whether or not they would send him a Yetirambler.
So is this being sponsored by Yetirambler? Did I just not get the note?
It is not, but it is not, but it
today's
should
podcast is brought to you.
I know. I should totally reach out
Yeti.
to Yeti and let them know that we just gave them a good commercial. And actually one of our alums at WNL is like their GC. And they're a great Texas company. So there's my Yeti commercial that was not paid for. But
we should at least get Yetiramblers out of this.
We should. I'm totally going to send them this clip and talk to them about it. So here's what's interesting to me about that, though. Like, I don't believe in reasonable people or rational people. I think they're just fictions all over the law, but we got to have some way of like setting a norm. And I would love for someone to do an empirical study, like comparing like the release of an 8K or the release of a 10K to what's said in the tweet about the 8K or 10K. Because I guarantee you, even just like with the Facebook Roadshow, like I teach Facebook's IPO when I teach SecReg. And we compare that like cultish roadshow video. Like I make students watch it, or sometimes we have a showing of it. We compare that cultish roadshow video to what's actually in the filings. And every year, like that's when students' minds are blown. But like, why did we all go by, well, I didn't do it, but why did so many people go by Facebook stock? Because of that crazy roadshow video that looks like a cult initiation that, that had a bunch of disclaimers in it, but still people were like, oh, I want to own Facebook, And so I would love to like have an empirical comparison, because nobody I know who is not a law professor, I get in fights on Twitter with people all the time about like facts that are in 8Ks and 10Ks. And I have people tell me I'm a liar. Lay people. And I'm like, it's in like, here's the link to the SEC website. And someone will follow up with, oh no, but so-and-so tweeted that. And if that's the case, I think what the reasonable person is doing is reading Twitter, reading social media, doesn't even know the SEC website exists, jumping on whatever, platform they're getting and trading because of what Elon Musk like, look at Dogecoin. Dogecoin exists because of tweets, right?
Yeah.
And so there's this standard of reasonable investor, and courts have been issuing rulings and applying this standard, but it's not informed by, any study of human beings. It's this fantasy version of a person. Most humans don't act like the ways reasonable investors are described to be acting, with prudence and judgment and doing their research. It's really it sort of fills in for in my mind what we want to hold companies accountable for. That if someone had looked at the SEC filings, would they have known that this was not true, or this version of things was not totally accurate, or this risk was actually out there? Then it seems they're not going to get in trouble for it. But most of the disclosures I think that public companies make, usually they're, some rare people will read them before investing. A lot of times they're read very closely after the stock price goes down to look for a way to sue.
Now, we've talked a lot about market manipulation, just kind of alluding to it. And we talked about materiality, we talked about market manipulation and the reasonable person. Like, what is actionable market manipulation? Kathy, do you want to take it? Ben, do you want to take it? Ben, go for it.
Oh boy. So market manipulation, and I probably should have reviewed this more closely beforehand, but essentially it's
why I'm pointing to you, Ben.
The boundaries of fraud. The SEC is usually most interested, in some sort of false statement. So market manipulation, you can think about it as trying to use some sort of unfair or improper means to manipulate the stock price. One way you could think about it is if you launch some kind of coordinated campaign, unrelated, to the merits of the company, to drive the stock price down of a particular company, just for your personal profit. That sort of thing, like a pump and dump scheme, would be market manipulation. So those sorts of actions. So simply, wanting and attempting to make the stock price go up, as long as the methods that are being used are reasonably fair, and the statements that are being made are not outright lies, it's hard to say that it's market manipulation. So it is an underdeveloped area, I think.
Right. And the reason I ask what is market manipulation is because, that's what gets people in the most trouble, right? So we've got our landmark Enron, WorldCom, which my students are not all too young to know what they are, and
horrifying.
Which makes me want to drink bleach for dinner. But we've got our big market manipulation kind of signposts. The SNL scandal from the 80s, and these big signposts, which are red flag market manipulation. But obviously, stuff happens incrementally to get to that point that ends up not being actionable, at the SEC, barring someone failing to file a report or something else that's more obvious. We can drop a $40 million fine on a billionaire, but what does that do, right? There isn't much we can really do until we get to that big red flag sign, moment. And so it's always interesting to me that I'm what are we all, I have these existential moments of, why do we do this and what are we doing? Us as in me, Ben, and Kathy, people who obsess about what corporations are doing all the time, because they're just, there doesn't feel like there's a lot of teeth in any of the enforcement, because the big moment is the market manipulation moment, and the stuff that happens before then, not so much. Now, I don't know if people know this. I learned this in doing my own research and putting Tesla into papers, and then going down this rabbit hole of being obsessed with Tesla. But a few years ago, Tesla released an 8K that said they would release material information via Twitter. So information that would normally go into an 8K could be released on Twitter first, or a tweet could be a material thing, right? We could tweet something and we want you to take that as material information about our company. So Kathy, first, what's the 8K? Because we've been throwing around the terms. And then tell me what you think about, why they might do that.
Yeah. So, I mean, so earlier we talked about how like companies release information periodically, right? So, I mean, this kind of goes back to the difference between public companies and private companies, which I know you talked about on a previous episode. So when a company is public, it tends to have a large number of dispersed shareholders. And that just means, you know, it has tons of shareholders, and their shareholders are no longer just like your mom and your sister. And so the SEC is worried about big information that the company has going on getting out to those dispersed shareholders. So there's a securities disclosure system in place that requires public companies to broadcast big news to all of their shareholders in a relatively timely fashion. So the things that they're required to file are they file an annual report, they file quarterly reports, and then when something new and exciting happens, they file something called a current report, which is called Form 8K. And this is, in theory, a way for the company to release information to all its shareholders. When I think about like an average, like a retail investor, your granny investing, buying some shares of stock to give to you on your birthday or whatever. I'm not really thinking that your granny's logging on to the SEC's website and like looking at all the recent disclosures and like making an informed investment decision, right? But like theoretically, somebody is out there doing that, right? And the stock price reflects the fact that all that information is out there and people are incorporating it and buying it and selling it and whatever. So theoretically, you should get all your information from 8Ks and annual reports and quarterly reports and all of that. When the company announced that it was going to share material information using social media, my not being a Tesla follower like Carliss, my guess is that it was in response to the stuff that had happened with like the Netflix stuff that Ben had talked about. So Netflix had released some potentially material information via Facebook. And then one potential workaround to that being a problem is just to tell your investors that like Facebook or Twitter is a place where you can get material information about the company. And that kind of like covers the company so that they're not being, they're not getting in trouble for releasing material information places where they're not supposed to release that information. So I think that must be why they did it, is to cover themselves, allowing that Twitter to be like a channel for communication to their shareholders.
Yeah. So I want to jump in with a practical ramification of this as well. But to illustrate it, I want to go back to a little bit darker time in U.S. history when Donald Trump was president of the United States. So he would routinely release significant information via Twitter. Now, imagine you are a professional stock trader. And the jobs report that the Department of Labor issues is very important. It sets the tone for the day. What that report says significantly influences the way the market's going to move. Now, normally that report is issued by the Department of Labor at a particular time so that everybody has access to it at the exact same time. And so if you're the trader who's used to this, you're getting up, you're having your coffee, you're getting the office, you're logging onto the DOL website, and you're just waiting like everybody else for the orderly and regular release of this information. Now, suddenly, you're getting into the office, and it turns out that the president of the United States has just tweeted out, an hour or two before hand, what the jobs report says. And so if you are one of his Twitter followers and you're paying attention to him on social media, suddenly you have an edge over all those other people who were waiting for it to be released through the regular channel. You can go ahead and make a bet before they find out what the numbers are. Now, practically what this means is you have to watch the throne. You can't take your eyes off of what the president was doing. Because if you do, you're going to miss that information. You're going to be at a real disadvantage. Now, if you're a Tesla investor and they've told you they release material information through Twitter, you can't just look at the SEC filings. You really have to watch Elon Musk on Twitter. So you have to follow that channel. That's the practical impact of it. Like it drives everyone to focus more on what's going on. So there could be, I can see a good business rationale for this if I want to be very generous. that the Twitter channel is a very valuable marketing channel. Now you tweet out ads, other things, and they have to watch all these things now because sometimes there's stock information where, beforehand you didn't have to do that. You could just look at the SEC filings. So it's an interesting, and kind of new dynamic. And if companies can force people to pay attention to their social media, they can force them to consume other messages as well.
So what's interesting that I found is, pre this announcement, if something like, I can't think of a corporation that releases an 8K, but then doesn't also release a press release, unlike the Newswire and everything too, right? So it would be like, 8K drops, press release drops, usually in that order. Like, it's usually not press release 8K, it's usually 8K that attaches the press release that's going out simultaneously. And so, as Ben said, everyone gets the information at the same time. Now, with these tweets, what I'm noticing is that tweets go out, oh, damn it, that was material. Let's file an 8K after. We already covered ourselves to say that we will tweet material information. And so it could be material out there. But if it really, really, really is material, then we go ahead and drop an 8K that's like, hey, read our tweet. And so what I think is interesting about that is, one, it gets to our opening conversation of, well, obviously 420 was a joke. Well, I thought that poll was a joke, but right? Like, we consider
and we're all talking about it.
We're all talking about it. We all are rational people who follow the stock market and follow Twitter. Yet we sometimes think it's a joke, but we vote anyway in case it isn't. And then after the fact, we find out it isn't a joke. It's giving them that cushion to like just play with the information. He totally could have said later, it's a joke. And we'd be like, oh, yeah.
He could have said a joke, :
Yeah. But even after the fact, if he said, obviously I'm not going to sell $10 billion of my shares, right? We'd all be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, right? We totally thought it was a joke. That's why we voted in a poll. It's a poll on Twitter. How could that be real? But it gives them that room to play and like not violate the securities regulations, right? Like, they can literally after the fact decide that tweet was material, that one wasn't, and then release a press release in an 8K to follow up with it with some more details. And so that's what kind of bothers me about it. It's like a total way to just manipulate the system all around. And as Ben said, I've got to I don't own Tesla stock, but I do own a Tesla. So, I'm following them on Twitter for both classroom purposes and like to see if like something I want is on sale. Because I can't just monitor the SEC for class anymore. I've got to monitor Twitter for class and Twitter for my personal consumption as well, right?
Yep.
So that's what they've effectively done. They've made me a total captive audience.
So what's interesting about his stock sales, there's a challenging problem for corporate executives where if you own stock if you're a CEO and you own stock in the company, normally we sort of frown on, they're insider trading laws that limit a CEO's ability. Say, like, let's say you're Elon Musk and you get word that there's going to be a recall of Tesla cars and your stock price is at an all-time high and you want to go ahead and sell some of your stock. If you know the recall notice is going to go out in 3 days and people might get upset about that and the stock price might go down, if you go ahead and sell your stock while you have that information, that's probably going to be considered insider trading. So this is a problem for all public company executives is, they always know more about the company than anybody else does. And so how do they ever manage to sell their stock when they need to? Sometimes they need to remodel their house. Baby needs more diapers, whatever.
I need a new rocket to space.
Yeah, you want to launch a car into space, whatever. Pay taxes. So there's this system that's set up. I think it's a 12B1 plan where you can go ahead and declare, say 6 months in advance, 5 months in advance, that on this particular date I'm going to sell this number of shares. If you put that kind of plan in place, then what happens essentially is you've made the decision to sell with the information you now have that far in advance. But the idea, as long as the plan is locked in, when that date arrives and the sale is executed according to your old instructions, the information, the value of the information you had when you made that trading decision is supposedly, much attenuated, and so it allows executives to access capital. So these plans, I think they're sent to the SEC, but I don't believe that they're publicly available. So one thing that will be interesting to watch is to see whether or not Mr. Musk had a trading plan set up well in advance to avoid insider trading liability when he kicked off this poll. It may be that this trade was just scheduled. It was a series of trades that were.
I think the 1.3 was scheduled. Like, I think 1.3 billion of it was already scheduled. The rest of it was him tweeting out a poll.
I also think like it's not like you don't, it's interesting. The plans have always been really interesting to me, right? Because I don't recall, I don't think there is a specified, you don't have to do it in a particular time ahead of time, right? And you don't have to sell like when the time comes. You can decide not to. It's like an affirmative defense if you get accused of insider trading, to say, like, if someone says like, oh, Ben, you insider traded, you can be like, no, I planned this 6 months ago.
Right.
But it's not like no one's going to make you sell it if you didn't want to. So like,
you can change your mind.
Yeah.
You can change your mind. I mean, I always, like, when I talk about it in class, I always say to people, like, this is like, if you're like, oh, my daughter's going to go to law school like next year, so I'm going to have a plan in place in August of next year to sell some of my stocks so that I can write the tuition check. But yeah, I don't know. I guess he would have an affirmative defense for that 1.x%, right?
Yeah. Although I just wonder if, the tweet fixes the insider trading, because it's not insider trading. You told all of us you were going to sell your stock.
Well, it's one thing if he's telling us he's selling the stock. It's another thing if he's telling us there's a recall coming and I'm going to sell my stock.
Right.
So I don't
insider trading, because he told us that there's going to be a recall.
Yeah. Once the recall is announced and the markets digested the information, I don't think that's you're not getting an unfair advantage based on knowing about the recall that nobody else knows about.
Yeah.
And I don't think I looked at it and I don't think the stock really reacted much to the recall notice. It was just like, it was a cable, around a backup camera, so they're just fixing a cable. I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So
if the stock price doesn't really move, then the other thing that's really interesting about this is if you say things that turn out not to be true and the stock price just keeps going up, then nobody's going to sue you. And it's just the wildest thing. Like, false statements only get punished when the stock price goes down.
So here's what's interesting to me about the Tesla stock price. The Tesla stock price moved more on the announcement of him selling shares than it did on the announcement of the recall. And he actually did sell the shares. So so it's not a false statement at all. Like, he sold the shares. Like, the recall, it like barely budges, which kind of just confirms that like his tweets and his antics are doing more to change the price of Tesla than anything that like we tell our students they should care about. So we've only got a few minutes to close, and I want to close out with the final question. Kathy, should Elon Musk stop tweeting?
I mean, for my entertainment and class prep reasons, no. I think he should continue. But I think that, and also, like, if I were to think about investors, I'm not 100% sure that investors would want him to, because like, basically, as long as his tweets and his personality are giving him more, essentially bringing him more lovers than haters, like that just increases the bottom line. But I guess if I were Elon's, like if I were Tesla's general counsel, like what would I feel? I think I would probably be refilling my Xanax prescription pretty often. So maybe that person would want him to stop tweeting.
Yeah. So if I'm Tesla's board of directors, I would want more controls on the tweeting, but I probably wouldn't want him to stop. As long as he has a lot of money, I'd feel okay with it, because I don't think they can get insurance anymore. So he has to be the one who personally insures the board of directors. I don't think other companies are willing to write insurance because they think it's just too much of an unpredictable risk. So as long as you can keep that risk under control, he's done a great job whipping up a large base of fanboys who buy the stock, and as long as that keeps going, it allows them to raise capital at very favorable terms.
So I kind of take Kathy's perspective. I don't want him to stop tweeting because I want to keep writing papers about how he screws things up. And I am very, very selfish about like loving that I have an Elon Musk alert set and I never know what's going to happen and what's going to like go in the casebook or what's going to go in the article.
Very exciting.
Very exciting. Well, I'm going to thank my guests. Thank you, Kathy and Ben. And what's crazy is this is how we talk all the time. Like these are our texts. Like, oh my God, what's Elon Musk doing? So we don't lead the most exciting lives as law professors. We talk about security.
Talking about this is extremely exciting.
Yes, this is what we do all the time. This is like my group text thread. So I was excited to be able to get my group text friends on the show. So on next week's show, I am having India Thussey, and we are going to talk about her book, which is coming out, which is Policing Bodies, Law, Sex, Work, and Desire in Johannesburg. And on that episode, we are going to discuss, is it time to legalize sex work? So a very, very exciting topic. We're going to talk about—
It's already legal in Nevada.
Already legal in Nevada, not so much in Johannesburg. And, you know, she talks a lot about the foster care disciplinary system to sex work pipeline for girls, which is kind of like the school to prison pipeline for boys. So that's what we're going to discuss next week. Thank you all for listening to the show. I am at Carliss C on all platforms. Please join us next week. And if you ever miss the show, you can find us on everywhere that podcasts are broadcast. Thanks again.
Thanks so much.
Bye, y'all.